Greater Syria, or Bilad al-Sham. In the rich tapestry of Arab nationalist literature, Syria has often been depicted as a country torn from its historical roots, like a limbless trunk severed from its hinterland of Greater Syria. Take the bustling city of Aleppo, for instance. Once a vibrant hub of trade and culture, it stands today as a poignant example of this disconnect. Nowadays, when we glance at the political map of Syria, it seems obvious that there are thriving north-south connections between Aleppo and Damascus, both socially and economically. Trade routes of the past tell a tale of west-east connections that were even more robust than those between Aleppo and Damascus. Places like Mardin, Ain Tab, Gaziantep, and Harran, now part of southeastern Turkey, were integral parts of Aleppo's network. But what exactly defines the territory of Greater Syria, or Bilad al-Sham? Some may argue it encompasses modern-day Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Palestine, united by geography, culture, and history. However, it's not quite so straightforward. While Greater Syria is undeniably an Arab region with distinct characteristics, certain areas in northeastern Syria, east of the Euphrates River, have closer ties to Mesopotamia, or Bilad al-Rafadain, in present-day Iraq. Here, influences from Iraqi Arabic dialects are palpable, blurring the lines of Greater Syria's boundaries. From a Syrian perspective, the divide between Greater Syria and Mesopotamia lies somewhere near the eastern edge of the Badiyat al-Sham, the desert of Greater Syria, and along the shores of the Euphrates River. Ancient maps of the Ottoman Empire hint at this delineation, marking the river as the eastern border of Greater Syria. Today, the Syrian Arab Republic encompasses a territory smaller than Greater Syria, omitting Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, and parts now within Turkey's borders. Yet, it also extends beyond the geographical confines of Greater Syria, encompassing northeastern regions that stretch into what was historically Mesopotamia. The colonial powers, namely the British and French, played a significant role in drawing the borders between Iraq and Syria, often dividing not only Greater Syria but also parts of Mesopotamia. Whether intentional or not, these borders carved up the region, leaving behind a legacy of division and strife. Despite the attempts to fragment it, Greater Syria remains a geographic and cultural entity, albeit with internal variations. While colonial powers may have sown the seeds of discord, the failure of Arab unity plans cannot solely be attributed to them. Ultimately, the desire for power and influence among Arab rulers played a significant role in thwarting unity efforts. Amidst the chaos of war and division, one principle remains steadfast: the preservation of Syria's territorial integrity and unity. From the Assad regime to opposition groups, the sentiment is clear: Syria must remain whole. Even in the early days of the Syrian Revolution in 2011, peaceful demonstrators emphasized their unity as Syrians above all else. Yet, as events unfolded, the conflict took on a sectarian tint that diverged from the demonstrators' initial aspirations. Despite the divergence from their initial hopes, the principle of Syrian unity remains a cornerstone for almost all parties involved in the conflict. As the French Mandate drew to a close in 1946, Syria found itself at a crossroads, grappling with the complexities of forging a national identity. Unlike many other nations, Syria emerged from colonial rule as a state without a fully developed sense of nationhood, a political entity without a cohesive political community. In the days of the Ottoman Empire, the region was known as Bilad al-Sham, encompassing a vast territory that extended far beyond present-day Syria, including Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, Israel, and parts of southern Turkey. Within this expansive domain, the Ottomans established administrative districts, with the Vilayet of Syria, or Damascus, being just one among several. The term Syria itself has a convoluted history, originating from the Greeks' erroneous association with Assyria in ancient times. Despite its ancient roots, the term fell out of use for over 1,000 years until the Ottomans resurrected it in the 19th century. Meanwhile, Arabs continued to refer to the region as Bilad al-Sham. During Ottoman rule, the administrative districts within Bilad al-Sham did not serve as barriers to travel or trade. Rather, inhabitants freely traversed the region without encountering political obstacles. This fluidity contributed to a sense of interconnectedness among the diverse communities inhabiting Greater Syria. However, the French Mandate brought about further fragmentation, dividing present-day Syria into multiple states and administrative entities. exacerbating the challenges of nation building. The Syrians, united in their opposition to foreign occupation, staged uprisings against the French across the country, while Arab nationalists advocated for a unified Syrian Arab Republic. They faced resistance from movements within minority regions, each with its own set of priorities. This fragmented landscape hindered the crystallization of a singular Syrian national identity. Arab nationalists, including the Ba'athists, initially prioritized loyalty to the broader Arab nation over allegiance to the Syrian state. The Ba'ath party, in particular, rejected the notion of state boundaries, viewing them as obstacles to Arab unity. With the absence of a larger Arab union, regional identities based on birth or residence took precedence. In essence, the legacy of colonialism and the complexities of ethnic and sectarian divisions thwarted the organic development of a cohesive Syrian national identity. Instead, Syrians found themselves navigating a landscape shaped by external influences and internal tensions, struggling to reconcile competing visions of identity and allegiance. Decades ago, if you asked a Syrian Arab about their origins or religious affiliation, you'd likely receive a standard, somewhat evasive response. We are all Arabs. Arab nationalists in Syria were keen to downplay geographical names that hinted at religious backgrounds. Instead, they opted for more neutral terms, like Jabal al-Arab, Mountain of the Arabs, over Jabal al-Duruz, Mountain of the Druzes, or Jabal al-Sahel, Coastal Mountains, instead of Jabal al-Alawiyin or Jabal al-Nusayriya, Mountains of the Alois or Nusayras. Even Wadi al-Nasara, Valley of the Christians, was renamed Wadi al-Nadara, Blooming Valley. However, this linguistic shift didn't erase people's awareness of religious differences. Rather, it reflected a societal taboo surrounding discussions of sectarianism in Syria. Some argue that this attempt to erase regional identities may have backfired, making the issue even more prominent. Instead of fostering mutual understanding, it pushed discussions of sectarianism underground, breeding resentment and mistrust. While religion remains a sensitive topic, Syrian colloquial Arabic still contains subtle references to it, like asking Shudinu, what is its religion? When inquiring about the origins of a dish, the Alois, Druzes, and Ismailis, known as compact minorities, were concentrated in specific geographic areas where they formed the majority. This fostered stronger regional, tribal, and sectarian identities among these groups compared to Sunni Arabs, who were more dispersed across Syria. In the early 1960s, most Alois resided in the northwestern mountains, Druzes in the south, and Ismailis to the east and west of Hama. With the rise of the Ba'ath party in 1963, many migrated to urban centers. Initially, the Ba'ath party was ambivalent about promoting Syrian national identity, viewing it as a potential threat to Arab nationalism. It wasn't until Arab unity projects faltered and the prospects for pan-Arab unity dimmed that embracing a Syrian identity became more acceptable. A popular song titled Ana Suri, I Am Syrian, released in 1996 by Syrian artist Abd al-Rahman al-Rashi, celebrated Syrian identity alongside Arab identity. In the earlier years of Ba'athist rule, such expressions of Syrian pride might have been dismissed as regionalism at odds with pan-Arab nationalism. Additionally, the Ba'ath party's ideological rivalry with the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, SSNP, which advocated for a broader Syrian nation spanning the Fertile Crescent, fueled its reluctance to promote a distinct Syrian identity. The SSNP's popularity among minorities posed a political challenge that the Ba'ath party sought to counter. The history of the current Syrian regime has its roots in the summer of 1959, a pivotal time when several Ba'athist military officers found themselves relocated, or rather, exiled from Syria to Cairo following the formation of the union between Egypt and Syria, 1958-61. These officers, viewed with suspicion by the Egyptian President Gamal Abd al-Nasser's regime, were strategically placed far from Syria to prevent any attempts to undermine Egyptian authority over their homeland. The Syrian-Egyptian Union, known as the United Arab Republic, was initially envisioned to fulfill the aspirations of many Syrians and Egyptians who longed for Arab unity. This era was marked by fervent Arab nationalism, with Damascus being hailed as the heart of Arabism by President Abd al-Nasser. However, The Syrian-Egyptian Union was far from a partnership of equals. Egypt, under President Abd al-Nasir's leadership, held a dominant position. Syrian military leaders, seemingly willing to accept this imbalance, pursued the union to align with their unionist ideology, even agreeing to dissolve the Ba'ath party, a precondition set by Abd al-Nasir. This decision consolidated power in the hands of the Egyptian president, relegating Syrian politicians and military figures to subordinate roles, if any role at all. This move was criticized by Syrian Ba'athist military officers, who felt betrayed by the civilian leadership's acquiescence to Egyptian dominance, which contradicted their vision of Ba'athist Arab nationalism, a vision where all Arabs were to be equal, transcending existing differences. The exiled Syrian Ba'athist officers in Cairo, staunch proponents of Arab unity, were dissatisfied with their sidelined role in the Union. This sentiment reflected a broader trend among Arab nationalists who desired unity but only if they could maintain dominance. Subsequent efforts at Arab unification, whether between Egypt and Syria, Syria and Iraq, or broader regional initiatives, faltered due to an inability to share or delegate power effectively. Amidst the Syrian-Egyptian Union, a clandestine group of Ba'athist military officers began plotting in secret, aiming to reclaim power within Syria. Their discussions culminated in the formation of a covert Ba'athist military committee, tasked with orchestrating a takeover of the Syrian government, with the Ba'ath party assuming a leading role. This committee operated independently of the civilian leadership, which was sidelined following the dissolution of the party within Syria as part of the Union Agreement. Despite the dissolution of the party organization, Ba'athist activity persisted within Syria, led by a faction known as the sectarian or regionalists, who rejected the pan-Arab orientation of the traditional civilian leadership. The Ba'athist Military Committee clandestinely collaborated with the sectarian, leveraging their support to sideline the traditional civilian leadership once the military coup of March 8, 1963, successfully seized power in Syria. The composition of the secret Ba'athist Military Committee played a pivotal role in shaping Syria's trajectory for decades to come, with the social and sectarian backgrounds of its members proving crucial. The committee's leadership was predominantly composed of individuals from minority backgrounds, particularly Alois and Ismailis. This was reflective of the broader appeal of the Ba'ath party's secular Arab nationalist ideology to members of minority communities, who often resided in rural areas. The Ba'ath party's ideology promoted equality among all Arabs, regardless of their religious or sectarian affiliations. Unlike other Arab nationalist parties, which often prioritized Sunni Islam, the Ba'ath party embraced a more inclusive Arab nationalism that sought to empower minorities and transcend sectarian divides. The representation of minority officers within the Syrian army was significant, partly due to the opportunities it provided for social advancement, particularly for those from impoverished rural backgrounds. Additionally, historical factors such as French colonial policies, which favored the recruitment of minority groups into special military units, contributed to the prominence of minority officers in the Syrian armed forces. The closed community system prevalent in the early 20th century, characterized by collective suspicion and perceived threats from neighboring communities, influenced interactions among different religious and ethnic groups. While Ba'athists ideologically opposed sectarianism, they pragmatically utilized traditional social channels within their own communities to expand the party's influence. The recruitment of members from their own communities by the Ba'athist Military Committee was driven by practical considerations rather than sectarianism. It was a strategy based on trust and familiarity, allowing the committee to consolidate its power base and navigate complex social dynamics within Syrian society. The complex social dynamics in Syria are characterized by overlapping sectarian, regional, tribal, and socio-economic identities, which can reinforce one another. This overlap makes it challenging to discern which factors are at play in a given situation and can lead to the misinterpretation of tribal or familial loyalties as sectarian allegiances. The concentration of particular religious communities, tribes, and extended families in specific regions contributes to this overlap. Additionally, these groups often share religious affiliations, further intertwining sectarian, regional, and tribal identities. In some cases, These elements are so interconnected that they cannot be easily separated. Factors such as ideology, social class, intergenerational conflict, personal ambitions, and opportunism also influence loyalties and allegiances. While Alawi members of the Ba'ath regime have been accused of sectarianism, their motives may have been driven by favoritism towards individuals from their own regions, rather than sectarian bias. However, perceptions of sectarianism can create dynamics that are difficult to address, regardless of intent. The urban-rural divide in Syria carries a strong sectarian dimension, as compact religious minorities are primarily concentrated in rural, poverty-stricken areas, while larger cities are predominantly Sunni. This divide was exacerbated by the minority complex, which heightened tensions between urban Sunni populations and rural minority communities. However, this dynamic began to shift after 1963, with significant rural to urban migration. The influx of rural migrants into urban centers not only urbanized these newcomers but also influenced the ruralization of certain urban areas. This demographic shift further blurred the lines between urban and rural identities, complicating the already intricate social landscape of Syria. The narrative of the Alois as a persecuted minority who sought refuge in the mountains is challenged by historical evidence. While the Alois, along with other minority groups like the Druze and Ismailis, have faced discrimination and marginalization at various points in history, the idea of their migration to the mountainous regions as a means of escape from persecution is not supported by available evidence. Historian Kamal Salabi has argued against the notion of the mountain refuge, demonstrating that minority populations did not relocate to mountain regions to escape persecution elsewhere. Additionally, central Sunni Islamic authorities were not necessarily unable to establish dominance over these mountainous areas. The Alawi community, like the Druze and Ismaili communities, is viewed as a remnant of the Shia upsurge in Islam, indicating their historical presence rather than a recent migration to mountainous regions. Furthermore, regions like Jabal al-Duruz and Salamia, where minority populations are concentrated, are not situated in inaccessible highlands but in relatively accessible lowlands. The perception of the Alois as a persecuted minority seeking refuge in the mountains is thus considered a myth or cliché that does not align with historical realities. Instead, their presence in certain regions is attributed to historical factors and the natural evolution of communities over time.